just to describe a few of the practices that went on. I'll mention first of all that we built terraces on the ballot farm. Now, what are some of the other ones that went on around there?
The
Practices.
terraces were built on the ballot farm, on Johnson Place and Fred Zell Farm.
Yes, diversions
And
of terraces.
then the waterway was redone, starting from the stream on our farm up through the ballot farm. And that was made ready for tiling the day of the plowing contest.
You did tile the day of the plowing contest. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Walter, because I'd like to tell the listeners, all these practices took place on those 2 days, didn't they?
Yes.
The operations.
The waterway was completed by that time, but then the tie-in operations were done on those 2 days. And the soil structure is such that next to the stream you have good drainage with sand subsoil, but as you get farther up towards the hills, there's hardpan and of course a lot of wet spots in the fields, and that was the reason for the tiling. And I'd say approximately 2 miles of tile lines were put in.
I remember over on Irv Knuth's farm. By the way, Walter, Irv was sort of the spokesman for the group, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes, and Irv is gone. I think Mrs. Knuth still living?
She's living in Augusta.
That's great. I remember they resurrected an old spring that was kind of, used to run spring water. It was pretty much clogged up. But on that day, or those 2 days, they resurrected it, got it dug out, and put in a tank, a watering tank.
Yes.
And fenced it out.
And that was just over the hill in the opposite valley from where the tile lines were laid.
Yes, you're right there. Yeah, yes.
But it did a lot of good.
Yes, that was a worthwhile thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I'm sure it worked for quite a few years, didn't it?
Well, it still is.
Is it?
Yes.
Good to hear. 36 years ago. A lot of forestry work, Walter.
Yes. And I own that place now where most of the forestry work was done.
The tree planting?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm presently living.
I see.
And some of the trees that were planted to Norways up on top of the one hill there are probably 12 inches through and probably 40 feet tall or better by now.
Yes, it would be. Norway pine, some white pine, I suppose. Yes. Well, and then I also always tickled me that on the Avery Markham place, he had no water back in that 60 or 80 acres, whatever it was, and an outfit to show their works came in and drilled a well for him, didn't they?
Yes. The well is still there. It's not in use. But
it's not used. It's still workable then.
Yes.
Yes, a very much needed well. So they were able to demonstrate their equipment and how to do it and do some good along with it, too.
And it was right next to the display area, too, so they had water for the plowing contest.
You're right. It serves the water, yeah. Walter, I've got to ask you about the stream bank and all that along there. How did that all turn out afterwards? Would you appraise it?
Well, it turned out very well. Of course, stream bank improvement is not a job you do once and then forget about it.
I see.
Because it continually creates new problems. They started there, I would suppose, in April, and where the banks had were overhang, they took the black dirt back and then piled rock in there and then reseeded the banks. And then, of course, the waterway was constructed so that it drained into the stream, and that needed a little follow-up work the following spring. But a dam was put in and a tile outlet. And the long tile line normally, except in a very, very dry year, runs about half full of a 10-inch tile.
All the time? How about that? You took me out there one time, I don't know, 5, 10 years afterwards. And of course, that stream was all bare, cattle on each side.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very bare and so on. And it was a regular jungle, wasn't it?
Yes.
And, is it still pretty much that way?
Well, the owners now have been pasturing it, but there are a lot of trees there. And like you say, the undergrowth was so thick you couldn't even crawl through it. So it's good to pasture it limited basis.
To some extent.
Yes.
Walter, I'm thinking about, what are your thoughts on the crowds of people that were there? There were a lot of people there. Did we?
Yes.
What was the estimate? On the last...
the last day, some 80, 85,000,
yes,
something
we
like
had
that.
a lot of figures, but from what we see in here, I don't think that would have been too far. And we had a tremendous parking lots, and there were thousands of cars, weren't
Yes.
there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There were 4 parking lots, if I remember right,
Yes.
plus the airstrip.
Yes, airstrip for people to fly in. They flew in from quite a few states, didn't
Yes.
they? Yeah, to see this affair. The irrigation job, I must talk to you about that. We had, Walter, on the first day we had a plowing contest for all the counties in Wisconsin.
Yes.
So to determine who the Wisconsin winner would be to enter the national the next day. Do you know who that winner was? What county?
No, I can't
No, I
remember
don't
that
either.
anymore.
I don't either. And then we had a level land plowing contest too. And a winner that entered the national on Saturday, the next day. But what I'm thinking about, of course, the highlight was the contour plowing contest. And that was the going around in the circle, you know. But down in your place, we were going to have a national level land. But it was such a dry year, and that old pasture or hay ground was so hard. Tell us what happened. How did we get ready for it?
Well, it was very dry that year, so I contacted Moulton Irrigation from Somerset, Wisconsin, and they came down and brought an irrigation pump. And
When did they arrive? On Friday, wasn't it?
yeah, that was
Right the last
a
minute.
day or two before.
I think just the day before.
And I know the stream didn't furnish water enough. They had to dam it up so that they hold the water. So they
I don't
had
think
enough.
I knew that.
Yeah,
But they laid down, what, 2 inches of water that night?
yes.
And it was a beautiful sight.
I had the state level land contest, and then the next day the national level land contest was on Fred Zell's
All
20
right, I got
acres.
it turned around then, didn't I? Yeah. But anyhow, the night before, then they laid that water down, and that I don't think a plow would have gone in that ground, but it sure did after that nice soaking rain that they put on it. Well, there's so many things that we should or could talk about, Walter. How did you feel that the whole community felt about having it there?
Well, they were very enthusiastic about it, and the businessmen in Augusta cooperated very, very well. It was Gerald Strader and Clarence Hearn that had stores in Augusta.
Yes, yes, yes. We had wonderful cooperation. I remember. We've got to cut right here, Walter, and take a breather, and then we'll be back, and I'm going to visit with Mrs. Ballot about another phase of it, and then we will be back with you again. So for now.
The Colfax High School Biology Department is currently working on a community service project referred to as the Red Cedar Watershed Project. Being centrally located along the Red Cedar River, we will collect results from area schools. These results may be used by the Department of Natural Resources for their use in research. We would like to see many improvements in the quality of our local lakes and rivers. As members of the Tanner-Monoman Lake Improvement Association, we are deeply concerned about our water. We'd like to see something done about it, and if we don't care, who will?
Old friends, we're back again talking about 36 years ago, the National Plowing Contest and Conservation Field Days at Augusta, Wisconsin. We talked to Walter Lutke as one of the few living farmers that own land there. Talked to Walter, and he'll be back with us again for a summary. And now we're going to talk to Mrs. J. Ballot, Leona Ballot. And Leona, your farm was sort of the headquarters for a lot of things, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes. And Jay was your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Jay didn't, how long did Jay last after the contest?
Well, he died in 1960.
60.
But he had a heart attack in 55.
All right. I think some of us thought maybe we worked him too hard getting ready for it. But anyhow, he enjoyed it, didn't he?
Oh, he
And you folks.
was really
Yeah.
thrilled.
Now, let me ask you, you had at home with you there a son and a daughter, am I right?
And I had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy.
Yes. That. Before we get into the field day part, a feed company, as an idea, brought out a boy and girl, brother and sister, weren't they?
Yes,
From New York.
from New Jersey, I
Or
think
New Jersey.
they were.
And to spend a week with you folks.
Yes.
And they lived with you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about them.
Well, the boy was my daughter's age. They were 15, and the girl was my son's age, 13.
Were they ever on a farm?
They had never been on a farm before.
They didn't know what milk come from or where,
no.
where the eggs came from.
No.
Well, that was the idea that this feed company had in mind of bringing them out. And now they took a lot of your time because you folks really, you had 4-H club meetings there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what else?
Well, and they did all of the farm work. They helped with
I see.
unloading silage and baling hay and everything that we had to do.
And then you took them to other places for club meetings and things.
Yeah, well, they went to our orchard and picked apples, and we were really busy from
They
morning.
had a great experience and a great learning process for them. And now to summarize that, there's lots we could say. Did you keep any track of them afterwards?
I heard from them a year ago last Christmas.
Good.
But this year I didn't hear
Is
from them,
that
but
right?
I'm going to try and get in touch with them again.
Well, that would be nice. Those
Yeah.
kids are 50-some years old, aren't they?
Oh, yes.
The kids are, yes. All right, now, you folks had a lot of conservation work done on your farm. And the morning of the National Field Day, I hosted a tractor tour around the 1,000 acres. And on that little wagon, I had Ezra Taft Benson, who was the Secretary of Agriculture, Governor Walter Rennebaum, and a lot of our own, not a lot, we didn't have room for a lot, but several of our own committee members and myself, and we showed them everything planned and so on. Now, getting just before noon, we got pretty hungry. We smelled turkey way up on the field side up there. Tell us what you prepared for.
Oh, we had a regular turkey Thanksgiving dinner. We had turkey and all the trimmings.
Now, you had a lot of help, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, my mother-in-law cooked the dinner.
Is that right?
Yes, and there was lots of help.
Yes. And I'm going to show just this picture. I wish you could show more. You have so many pictures. And here we are around the table, and right in the center is Mrs. Ballot. Because she had so much help, she didn't have to serve the turkey, fortunately. And on her, let me look, on her right is Ezra Taft Benson, who I think is still alive, and he must be well in his 90s. And Governor
Kohler.
Governor Kohler, what did I say?
I don't know, but
Oh,
you
yeah,
didn't say
Governor Kohler, thank you. Yes, yeah. All right, and then some of the rest of us. See Bob Nelson here. He was representing the station, the program director of WEAU Radio, and Harry Hyatt, the manager, and they were great supporters of conservation, and they sponsored all this. All right, now, did you ever have a crowd like that at your Thanksgiving table before?
Oh, yes. We have a big relation,
family,
and
yes,
we
yeah.
had lots of big family
Yeah,
doings.
but you probably never had the Secretary of Agriculture.
Oh, no, I never had such important people.
Well, a number of these people I see on here are some of our local farmers
Yes.
and so on. I can't mention everybody, so I won't mention any. And myself, and Jay, I don't see him on the picture, but he's there right close, your husband, yeah. What were the after effects as far as your family was concerned?
Well, it was, it really did a lot for the farm. Our crops were very much better because of that drainage that they had.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a pond that we never could work, and they drained that, and we could work all of that land.
Well, now these weren't any ponds standing with water. They were just areas that were just a little bit too wet from seepage, like Walter described under the soil there. Now, I don't think we built terraces on your property. I don't think Jay ever liked them too well, did he?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't.
Well, he didn't say too much about them.
No.
Yeah. Well, we talked about them a lot. Yeah. You remember the concession area, the big area there?
Well, I didn't see too much of it. I was busy with everything else.
Yeah.
But after the plowing contest, we drove around the road that they had taken
Yes.
to see everything.
Well, that was a nice time to do it. Now, I understand, see, this was Friday and Saturday, that we should have stayed open on Sunday, right? That a lot of people came there on Sunday.
I didn't know about that.
Well, they did. I think you'll have to ask Walter about
Yeah.
that. But I understand that there were a lot of people came after it was over with just to drive around and see what happened. Of course, you remember I had a little trailer up there that I stayed there overnight for. I want to tell you, Mrs. Ballot, this is something I wouldn't have wanted to miss. once, but I wouldn't want to do it again for anything.
No, it was quite a year.
And I would say this, that I was, I think I weighed maybe 190, 95, my usual weight at the start of that. But the day it was over, I was down to 165. So I started eating again. Yeah, but day and night, as all these big trucks rolled in with machinery, it just kept me bouncing me out of the trailer bed right along all night to show them where to park and all that. Any particular thing that I've missed here about the band? Yes, your banquet, or anything else that we could get in here?
Well, the thing that I thought was so great was all the people in the county was there to help.
Yes.
They would help
Yes.
tear up fences and
Yes.
put them back, and
Put them back.
it was just wonderful, the cooperation that there was.
It truly was. The businessmen in
Yeah.
Augusta, and just everybody pitched in and did a good
pitched in
job.
and helped.
Yeah. I'm going to, I think maybe get a time here, because when we summarize, I've got a lot of things. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Now, there is a nice loud necktie, isn't it?
That's,
And each of the farmers, landowners got one, and the committee got one. And when we wore these, if you glanced someplace and this thing reflected in the eye, you knew it was one of the workers or farm owners. It says National Plow Contest, Augusta, 1953. Also, while we're, well, maybe we won't start this, if we can hopefully have enough time afterwards to tell a little bit about many other features that took place during the time. When did you leave the farm?
in 1962.
No, and the ballots had a wonderful Jersey herd. Jersey
yes.
herd, yeah. And the boy and girl from New York saw a lot of jerseys while they were out there. All right, we'll take a break here now. We're going to come back and hopefully have enough time to do a little summary and get in a few highlights of a few things we haven't covered yet. Here we are to summarize the National Plowing Contest going back 36 years ago. Mrs. Ballard has so many pictures. I wish we could have shown all of them to you. And she handed me this little, what do we call it, pennant or whatever it is, or pennant advertising the plowing contest. And she has many ribbons, so does Walter and so on there too. Walter, let me ask you first. Do you remember who won the National Plowing Contest?
I can't remember the person's name. It was somebody from Ohio.
From Ohio, I see. Mm-hmm. And was that the contour plowing contest or the level land?
That was the contour.
That was the contour, yeah. That was the big one, and I remember the whole crowds of people up on the hill overlooking where all the plowmen were. When they gave the signal, how many do we have? 25, 30, didn't we? States represented?
Something like that.
Something like that. And of course, the day before, that many counties. Well, do you remember, I have to tell this, Irv Knuth was, of course, kind of represented the group. And on the morning of the National Plowing Contest, he had a police escort from his farm up to the radio station to go on the air early with the state soil conservationist. And Irvie had the fastest ride he ever had in his life, and everybody got out of his way, too. And then, did you remember listening to Everett Mitchell?
Oh, yes, quite well, quite often.
He put on a Saturday, what they call it? They call it the Farm and Home Hour, didn't he? Every Saturday.
From WBBM in Chicago.
Chicago, yeah. And Everett Mitchell would open it up always. It's a beautiful day in Chicago, and I hope it's just as beautiful wherever you are. And then he might say, oh, it's 20 below zero, and the wind is blowing 40 miles an hour, but it's a beautiful day in Chicago. Well, this day, he opened his program up at noon. It's a beautiful day in Augusta, Wisconsin. I hope it's just as beautiful wherever you are. And he was a well-known back in those days, and Covered a lot of territory, yeah. So we were always kind of tickled about that. Do you remember the concessions? We had a lot of...
Oh, there was, all of the churches and everything had
Yes.
eat stands, and
stands.
there was a big area with tents and things.
Huge area.
Yeah.
And Walter, lots of machinery.
Lots of machinery. Yes.
Every tractor and machine company had lots there and demonstrated. And our wagon tours.
Yeah.
I think there were 25, 30 wagons
Must have been.
that people could jump on the hay rack and make this tour. There were roads all over the 1,000 acres there, yes, yeah. Uh-huh. Do you remember who entertained us on the first day, Mrs. Ballard, up in the stand? Wasn't that Homer and Jethro?
Yes.
Did you see them?
Yes.
Yeah, Homer and Jethro the first day. And then you remember, both of you, we all remember Maggie and Scotty,
Oh, yes.
and they were there lending their talents to the show on several occasions, I know that. Were you, of course, you were at the Plowman banquet.
Oh, sure. That was really nice.
Full house, wasn't it, Walter? Yeah. And it was held in the old American Legion Armory where our post office is now.
Yes.
And it was full. What do you remember, Mrs. Ballard, about the, we had the Queen of the Furrow selected too, competition.
Well, I don't remember who it was that won it, but I have a clipping of her picture
You
and
do.
all about it, but I don't have it right here.
Well, I wish we should have taken time to dig that out
Yeah.
to get her name, because I don't remember her name either. But that was always a kind of a big part of these plowing contests. Well, I think that we've covered at least some of the things that happen. I'm so glad you came in with us, and you say hello to Herb Zank, and we wished you could have had Herb with us too, but on a program like this, it's easy to get too much. See? Yeah. Now, I do want to end up then by, you help me out on this if I'm getting anything wrong, Walter. This was in 1953. Now, what happened the next year? The next year, the University of Wisconsin picked up and started Farm Progress Days.
Yes.
And they've never missed a year, have they?
No.
Farm Progress Days have been held all around the state in various places. And see, what year are they scheduled here now? Back in Eau Claire County.
1992.
1992, Eau Claire County will host Farm Progress Days. So in general, we can say we'll be back to where it all started, won't we?
Yeah.
Maybe what we've said here will give, I don't think they've selected the site yet.
Sounds like it might be right in our area, though.
I've heard a little bit about there's some possibilities on that too. Well, we'll wait and see. Thank you so much again. We must wind things up, and well, maybe when it's 40 years or 50 years, we'll get together again and reminisce some more. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, and goodbye. Greetings, everyone. Old timers. Well, we're going to be talking to you old timers today, and we're going to bring back memories to you, too. Nice to be with you again. And you might be wondering why I've got such a get-up on. But we're going to be threshing today, or talking about threshing. And who of you in our group of elderly people haven't had some experience at threshing time? If you didn't live on the farm yourself, your sister did, and you went out and helped her prepare the meals for the threshers. Or if your brother lived on the farm, you went out and helped him maybe that threshing day, and so on. And of course, it was always pretty dusty threshing. We'll be talking about some of those things. And so it was nothing, you usually wore a big old red handkerchief tied around your neck to keep the dust from going down. And a straw hat, I couldn't find a really good farmer straw hat anymore. but I got one fairly close to it that I wear gardening. And the jacket, somehow it's shrunk. It's too small for me. And I don't have a bib overalls anymore, which we used to wear. Farmers, thrashermen, and all. Now today, yes, thrashing. And I've got two guests with me, and we're going to enjoy visiting with them. Now we have Lyle Dahlgren. Lyle, you know a lot about thrashing.
Hello, Pat.
Good to see
Nice
you.
to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. And what part of the country were you born and raised in?
I was born and raised down in Arkansas, Wisconsin.
Down near Durand.
Near Durand, that's
All right. And you grew barley, oats, wheat, and all those things.
Oh, yes, you bet.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, I just enjoyed having Mrs. Bullis with us. Mrs. Bullis, so good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And you're going to tell us about how you fed those thrashers in days gone by, right?
I remember very well how I fed them.
Oh, sure. We'll talk about it. First, I think people will be interested in knowing, of course, I knew your husband Vern very well. And where was your farm?
It was out on 53, and it's where the new Oakwood Mall is now.
It doesn't look like it used
You wouldn't recognize it.
No, I try to figure out where your buildings were, and I can't do that. Well, now we're going to start, and we're going to take a little break here, but we're going to, I'm going to say this, and we'll start out with shocking the grain. We're going to have a binder to bind the grain and put it all into bundles and into the shock. And let's say it's all shocked now. You remember those beautiful fields this time of the year, a little earlier, with all the shocks in the field? Well, that's the grain and what we're going to talk about. And then we're going to start with Lyle and see what we did with those shocks. So that's it for now, but we'll be right back. Greetings once again, old friends. We're back again at thrashing time. Well, I took the handkerchief off. He told me, Lyle told me I wouldn't have to tend the straw pile or the grain spouts, and those are the dirty places to work with the dust and all that. So I took them off, and they were a little too warm anyhow, Lyle. Well, Lyle, let's say now that we got the grain all cut and it's in shocks.
That's right.
Going way back into those days.
That's right.
What are we going to do with that grain now? What do we?
We're going to shock it up now.
Well, it's shocked. Let's say it's shocked in the field. Now we're going to, what are we going to do?
Well, I think we ought to stack it, don't you?
Stack it. That was the old way of doing it, wasn't
Yes,
it?
that's right.
Now describe the stacking a little bit.
Well, what we used to do in stacking, we used to start a pile in the middle, start the shocks, the bundles in the middle, and work out. Then we got out so far, we always tipped them up a little bit toward the outside row. We tip up a little bit so it drains.
So they drain.
Drain the water would drain off, so it wouldn't get wet. Otherwise, it'd soak.
Yeah. And
soak in.
you'd start a big base, maybe 10, 12 feet across.
That's right, 10, 12 feet across, that's right.
And we'd haul the bundles in and pitch them off to you if you were, did you stack?
Oh, yes, I did
You
some
did.
stacking.
I never, my dad tried to teach me, but before I learned how, he was good. He knew how to.
My dad did most of the stacking, too, but I did stacking toward the last.
Yes.
latter part.
Well, now, later on, we got to shock thrashing. Now, what do we mean by that?
Well, that's sending bundle teams out into the fields, and loading the bundles onto the wagon and hauling them in and feeding them right into
Right to the thrashing
right to the
machine.
thrashing
We
machine.
skipped the stacking.
That's right. Then we skipped the stacking.
Now, that was quite a lot of work. What were the advantages of stacked grain, though, however?
Well, I don't know. I think they've got a better quality grain out of it.
If you left it in
If
the
you
stack
left it
long
in the
enough.
stack long enough.
Uh-huh.
But if you didn't, it was worse.
It was worse because it would be
That's right.
heating, I guess
That's
they
right,
called
it
it,
would heat.
or in the sweat fire, we used to call it. But yeah, I see it. But if you left it go long enough, it was a beautiful way to protect grain, wasn't it?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
And then when you once got in the stack, you didn't have to worry about a storm knocking the shocks over or anything like that.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, now then, in the shock thrashing game later on, what about, let's get to the thrashing equipment now. And back in those days, what did we have for power?
Well, we had the old steam engine.
The old steam engine.
You betcha.
And that was a lot of power, wasn't it?
You bet it was.
Yeah.
They used to figure a 20-horse steam engine was equivalent to about a 60-horse gas.
Yes, and well, there you have it. Yeah. Now, I remember we as boys used to have to get wood ready for for firing that steam engine. And we'd gather up all the old posts and any other junky wood so as to have it there where he was going to park the engine and do the thrashing. And then we had the water boy and a water tank.
That's right.
Because we had to have, to get steam, we had to have water, didn't we?
That's right.
Yeah.
This, the water wagons used to, always had a fellow and had a team on a water wagon, and they'd go to a creek at our area.
Yes, we did
Go to the
too.
creek and had a hand pump on it.
It was a lot of work, wasn't it?
You bet. And they'd suck all that water out of the creek into fill that tank, and then they go to the... And I remember when I was a boy, and the man who did our thrashing, he had a boy my age, and this boy was the water monkey, we called him. He went for the water. But I went with him down to the creek, and we got to playing around with frogs and fish and tadpoles. And we were in trouble when we got back because everything was closed down. Sure. No water, they couldn't have any steam. That's right.
Now I remember the big belt went from the steam engine over to the separator. Tell us about the separator, the thrashing machine.
Yeah. You mean the belt, that was
the big belt.
The big belt, that's the drive belt.
That drove the whole...
That had it half twisted, half turned.
Yeah. And then describe the separator, or the thrashing machine itself.
Well, the thrashing machine itself had what they call a feeder.
Yep.
The feeder, some had wing feeders and some had just a single feeder. The smaller separators had just a single feeder. And you drive up as close as you could and sit the bundles into that. And some of the bigger machines had wing feeders, they called it.
Yeah.
One on each side. And they'd load that feeder up and then go in and go to the hopper where there was knives to cut the band. And then it went through the cylinder and through the concaves and through the cylinder into the screens. We call them screens, they call them sieves. And from there on, it was all flailed out and across the grain racks, they call them. And the straw rack was above and the grain racks below. So the grain would go through that and go through the sieve, and the top would go back to the straw, and the top would go back to the blower and blow it into the stack.
And the grain would come out a spout on its own, and you had to have a man there. We call him the sacker.
That's right.
He sacked the grain, Well, tell us, some places, our thrasher man used to just charge by the sack. However, there's a weighing bucket up there. Tell us about that.
All right. The later machines, well, I think they came out about 1914 or 15. They come out with what they call a heart weigher. Several different companies used the same weigher.
No, I'd say, sure.
It's called a heart weigher. And that held a half a bushel.
Yeah.
And on that, every time you changed from one kind of grain to another, you had to change the weigher over it.
Sure.
For oats, it was 32 pounds.
Yes,
Which was half a bushel would actually be 16 pounds.
Yeah, I'd rather have.
And barley was 48, rye was 56, and wheat was 60 pounds to the bushel.
Yeah.
But the weigher held a half a bushel, so we set them at half, each a half, see.
And then, of course, his charge would be how many times that dumped and so much a bushel for it. Yeah, now our man would charge by the sack. Now, sometimes if the grain was heavy, he was taking a beating, but if it was light, he was doing pretty well, wasn't he?
You bet.
Because I don't know whether I think our old-time listeners know, from one year to the next, there could be an awful difference in the quality of the grain.
Yeah, that's right.
You might have a sackful that's only a bushel one year, and the next year a sackful would be a couple of bushels.
Yeah, up to 3 bushels.
Now let's spend just a little minute here on the, now that man who run the sacker, he was stuck right there. And if it was dirty and dusty of the wind blowing, he was in a bad place, wasn't he?
That's right.
He needed a red handkerchief and then some.
Yeah, that's right.
Now we built a straw pile, and that was pretty important in our day. My dad wanted that straw pile taken care of. And what kind of an elevator conveyor did we have to start with in the old machines?
Well, in the older machines, they had a conveyor, something like our today's bundle carriers are, not a bundle carrier, but a hay bale
Yes,
conveyor,
just
something like that.
carry it along.
And they take it up into the to the straw stack, and up there they had several fellas that would take the straw and spread it out and make a stack out of it.
Make a good stack. And usually, I think we'd have about 4 men. Now, when you had a conveyor that way, then we built a straight across straw stack because they moved the straw. Now, when we came to a blower a little later on, then you had these curved because they could run the blower.
Yeah.
You had a man run the blower, didn't you?
That's right.
And then you had kind of an arc in the straw stack.
The later ones had a automatic blower that just goes so far.
That's right, sure.
Put a peg in a hole and that would go just so far.
Yes, that's right, that's right. Well, there's a lot we could say about these old thrashing machines and all that.
So.
We're going to have to take a little break here now, and then we'll be back, and we're going to, you know, when you were thrashing, or we were thrashing, I'll tell you, it meant a lot what kind of a dinner we were going to get, didn't it?
It sure did.
It sure did. We're going to find out about that
And
in
we really
a
could
little
eat,
while.
too.
All right, yes, and now we could eat. Okay, we'll be back, old friends. Back again, old friends. I hope you're still with us. I'm getting hungry. How about you? We've been thrashing now there with Lyle all forenoon, and looking forward to it, at least us young fellas, and I think the old fellas too, used to look forward to getting in there to the big long table and dinner. And we have Mrs. Bullis here, and Salma Bullis, who told us that their farm is right here where the Oakwood Mall is, around that territory, some 300 acres. And Mrs. Bullis, you prepared a good many thrasher meals then, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Was this something that you had to do a lot of preparation for it, or did it come natural?
Well, there was just so much to do, we got ready for between 12 and 15 men every time.
All right.
And my sister-in-law, who lived on the same farm, would come and help me. And sometimes a neighbor lady would come along with her husband. And sometimes some women from town liked to come. So we had lots of help in the kitchen.
Sure. And some of it probably wasn't help, but they...
Well,
you're too polite to say
I'm a very
that.
good boss.
That's good. But I know a lot of our listeners probably right now weren't born on a farm, but I bet they got out to your place and other places at thrashing time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it used to be fun to go to the next neighbor and help and
you did
visit.
that too.
Yes.
Yes. Now, I was going to ask you, I think you said that you didn't have a summer kitchen at your place.
No.
Well, just a bit about the summer kitchen for any that remembered it. I remember ours, and I remember it was just at the end of using it, and then it was torn down. But a summer kitchen was a building outside the house, and where the women they had the big stoves, did all the cooking. And the reason for it, I believe, Mrs. Bullis, was so that the house wouldn't be too hot for the thrashermen when they came in.
That's right.
But they didn't have any consideration for the cooks. They had to carry everything out to the summer kitchen, cook it, and then bring it back in and serve the thrashers. Well, the summer kitchen, and many times with a bell, a dinner bell on the top of it, and you pull the rope and call them in from thrashing or out in the field, wherever they happen to be. So that got to be a thing of the past. Now, what did you do? Did you have enough tables in order to seat all these thrashers?
I had a dining room separate and a table that would seat 12. And if there were more, I would seat them in the kitchen to where the family ate most of the time. And we had no problem about that. And of course, sometimes they didn't all come in right away.
I see.
I think some of them stayed out and greased up the machine and things like that.
And watered and fed their horses?
Yes, and so we could reset again.
I see.
So that was no problem.
Well, now, let's just think about what might that good meal that you prepared, what might it include?
Well, it included, you know, meat and potatoes. And for meat, we had ham or roast beef or roast pork. My favorite was to cook a beef and pork together.
Oh, I see.
It made such good gravy.
Yeah, yes, that was important. Oh, yeah.
And then we had vegetables, whatever was in season and what I had, generally 2 vegetables. And well, if it was tomatoes or cucumbers or anything like that, you know, and I always had a big garden, so I had that.
I bet you baked a lot of bread.
No.
No?
I have to admit I didn't.
I see.
But I made biscuits and things.
Well,
And sometimes baking powder biscuits for the evening meal, and with honey or something to go with them.
And when you were thrashing, you had the noon meal and the evening meal to serve.
Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
And, well, jelly or pickles if I didn't have tomatoes and things. And then, of course, it got to pie.
Well, I was waiting for dessert.
And apple pie was the favorite.
Yes.
Apple pie and
I think
cheese at that time. We always
Sure.
There used to be an old saying, apple pie without cheese is like a kiss without a squeeze.
Well, now there's something for oldsters and youngsters to remember.
And then, we'd have a berry pie or lemon, most any kind of pie, but apple was the favorite.
I think so.
The men liked that.
And I remember, I'd have to tell you this, my father, just to show you how much these meals meant to us, my father, I remember coming home from a neighbor one time after threshing, and that neighbor had green tomato pie. And he thought that was an insult to everything to serve anybody green tomato pie. We never had it. Now, I've heard some people say it's good, but when we served, my mother served apple pie, you know, or something, and green tomato pie. So he was all upset about that.
No, I've never eaten it either.
Yeah. And then beef, I think, was what I used to remember, and pork. And we had one neighbor who had sheep, and they would serve lamb quite often at their threshing.
We didn't raise sheep.
Yeah, no, we didn't either.
And of course, we always had lots of coffee.
Oh,
and
sure.
We always served milk. My family drank milk, so we always had the milk pitcher. And they seemed to like the cold milk. The men did.
Always good. And there's the youngsters around there, and there always were.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I didn't say anything about these men coming in. As you know, some years when we had rust in the grain or smut, and it would be so dirty. I remember a thrashing when we had rust all over us, half an inch thick.
Yeah.
And did you have a place for them to wash up a little bit if they wanted to?
We had a nice shed when the floor was level with the kitchen floor. And we called it our woodshed, which it was.
Yes.
But in that, I had a nice sink. And we had the men came in there and washed up. And they generally were very thoughtful about trying to keep this up.
Yeah. I know sometimes some wouldn't. I think they wouldn't because they say, well, to wash up for just 15 minutes while we're eating and then go back and get all dirty again, they wouldn't bother. But a lot of them, when you had it there.
It was, well, that was just very convenient to have that woodshed on there.
Sure, well.
And easy to get the wood from, too.
And so many times these old, summer kitchens were part of the woodshed and everything, too. Yes. Did you have one big battery, one big stove? I suppose your regular cook stove that you had all the time.
I had a regular cook stove and a gasoline stove. That was out in the shed.
Oh.
And so I could put things out there if I didn't have room. But I had a big kitchen range with a water reservoir on the end.
Yes.
And that was heated the water for the dishes and things.
Yes. And I suppose it was all that crowd, but you had help, of course. You no more than got everything washed up and put away. It's time to get the evening meal.
The evening meal. And that was generally like cold meat and if scalloped potatoes sometimes, or fried potatoes. And, oh, well, then we had meatloaf, I said, and sometimes baked beans, sometimes macaroni and cheese, and always Jell-O or something like that, and soft cake and cookies.
If everything went normal, about how many meals did you have to serve at your house?
We just served the 2 meals a day.
Yes.
And I would have, well, maybe 4.
2 days of thrashing.
And sometimes if they went home early, we would serve them coffee or something for the left.
Before the, I know sometimes you could be in kind of a dither when you didn't, something broke down or something, and they were there for a meal you hadn't planned on. That was
Well,
it used to happen.
It just happened.
Yeah.
And I canned my meat so we could make hot beef.
Oh, you're always
stuff
prepared,
like that.
always prepared. Well, we're going to have Mrs. Bullis. It's so nice to have you tell us about all those things, because it's rather typical of what went on up and down Wisconsin. And we'll be back for a little summary after this rest.
Okay.
We're back, old friends, for a little summary of what we've been talking about, and maybe hit a few highlights of things that we missed. And we have Lyle Dahlgren with us, who farmed and thrashed and all that down in the Arkansas area near Durand. And Selma Bullis, right outside of Eau Claire, was their farm, and where the all the mall is developed since. Lyle, to you a bit here. About when did we change from the steam engines, I mean, other than that, a demonstration, from the steam engines to gas and oil power?
Well, I'd say about 1924, or probably in that neighborhood, I'd say.
And of course,
Of course, there were still steam engines going, but,
Yes, I see.
but the tractors took over about that
They were
time.
coming in,
Maybe 22 they started probably.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the first I remember anyway.
Now, you thrashed for your neighbors.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We bought a thrashing machine in 1929, and we had quite an area that we'd done a lot of thrashing.
How many would you make in the fall, do you think?
Oh, you mean...
Hey, how many different places?
we'd make maybe around 20, 30 in the fall, and different jobs, you know,
Yeah.
for different neighbors,
Yeah.
and through the area there. And it was a good paying proposition.
And what were you thrashed, thinking about our grains, we had wheat, barley,
Wheat, barley, oats, and
rye.
rye.
Now, you were called on to do some other kind of thrashing too, off and on. Tell us about that.
Oh, yes. Well, we thrashed the whole clover, for one thing.
Whole clover.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean
Well,
to our, to our
I
younger
tell you,
listeners?
Yeah, well, they would, the second crop of clover usually one had the seed in. And after that was cut, and the clover would be dried so it shall hull out.
Yes.
They'd put it into the machine then, and we'd hull the clover.
Hull the clover.
And this, after the clover attachment on the machine, had what we call corrugated concaves. And those corrugated concaves were corrugated so it knocked the seed out better than grain, see? And because the seed is much smaller.
Yes, very small.
And of course, go over the sieves, and then we didn't use the conveyor for that, or weir for that, like we did for the grain. But we took that out separate.
So that was could be some pretty high-priced stuff you were
Yes, it
thrashing there.
was.
What about flax? Did you ever
Flax?
run into that?
Oh yes, we did some flax, and flax we raised some flax. Yeah, we had 2 farms there. We had and we rented 3 others for a few years there.
Yeah.
And so we had to put something in there. We had flax, and it was a pretty good deal. But We didn't grow flax very often because it was too hard on the soil.
Yes, it needed an awfully good soil, too.
We need good soil for that.
I was best acquainted with flax growing over in Minnesota, where they grew quite a bit there, yeah. Well, Mrs. Bullis, you told us what you prepared for the thrashers now, so that nobody thinks that those are the only big crews you had to feed during the year. Did you shred at your place, shred corn?
We shredded.
You had about as many men for shredding, didn't you?
The same crew
Same
for
number.
corn. The silo filling, we didn't have that much.
A smaller
help.
crew.
Yes.
But it lasted longer quite
Yes,
often, didn't it?
and that was right.
Yeah, and that came a little later after we got into
later,
silos.
And
What else?
well,
I bet you had did you saw wood in the wintertime and have a
well, you see, we had, we didn't very often have to have extra helper sawing wood.
Oh, I see.
Because we had 2 hired men all the time, and
yes, yeah.
the boys,
Yeah.
that was enough.
Yeah.
Of course, when Grandpa was there, he was always there helping.
Sure.
And at that time, then, unless we had an extra, I didn't have to feed them.
Oh, I see. Well, we used to have a little crew come along, at least when we boys were smaller, to help saw wood. I know that.
The men and Grandpa invented a wood splitter,
Oh, yes?
and it worked very well.
I thought that was just a new. We see them here in recent years, you know.
He had them back when.
And it worked good. And he probably
I was
missed getting
scared
the
death.
patent on it.
I was scared death on them and get the hand chopped off,
Oh,
but they
my
didn't.
goodness. Well, machinery always was dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think, Lyle, there's a whole lot more danger out there in the farms now. I see where some statistics show the greatest loss of life is in farming and
seems
injury.
that way.
Yeah. But when you think of that kind of equipment we have, it's no wonder.
Of course, they do have better safety equipment now than they had back
Yes,
then,
they
too.
do. But a lot of people are careless about it, aren't they?
Especially the corn shredders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of arms there, didn't we? I can think of a lot of our neighbors who, before they know it, they were into the rolls.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Mrs. Bullis, did you say you folks had some equipment that you did some of this work for the neighbors too?
Oh,
threshing?
yeah.
You
They
made the
did
round.
for the neighbors. And I was going to say, Grandpa invented a haycocker. And the one that he had for, to get the, what do you,
The clover seed?
no, it was this one he made for a model to take and have it, what do you call it? Anyway, that's down at Madison Museum.
Oh, well, good. Did he try to patent it? Or
That's what I wanted. I wanted the word patent.
Yeah. Well, I see our time is up, and we could go on here talking about good things to eat at threshing time, and as well as all the different kinds of equipment and so on. And I always think, Lyle, you and I were talking, and I'm sure Mrs. Bullis should agree. These are great experiences that we had that our younger folks don't have that opportunity.
That's right.
We're not on the air now?
Yes, we
are we?
We got to close it up, though, I guess, yeah. No, I'm sure we wouldn't trade any of it, would we?
No, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I wanted to say I wanted to take my great-grandchildren out to a farm.
Yes.
And I've been going to take them to the Groff farm.
Yes.
Well, we just didn't get around to it until they had this open house
Just
here.
the summer.
And that was a wonderful thing for my little ones.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bullis, for being
you're
with us.
very
Lyle, for
welcome.
coming in and talking about
you.
old-time threshing. And so that's it for now, folks.
Exactly.